My daughter says I ruined her life because I refused to support her wedding to her own sister's ex. Most people assume family drama is something that happens to teenagers and young adults who are still figuring out who they are, not to a woman who already has wrinkles around her eyes and keeps antacids in her purse next to her keys. I used to think that too, honestly. I really believe that by the time you have grown daughters and a long marriage, the chaos settles into something predictable. You argue about politics at dinner, you complain about bills, you miss people who have passed, and that is it. I never imagined that I would be in my living room one evening, looking at my younger daughter standing there with a ring on her finger, introducing her brand new fiancé, and realize in the same breath that my entire idea of what kind of mother I was had been completely wrong. My name is Marielle, by the way, and if you were on my couch right now with a mug of something hot in your hands, this is exactly how I would tell you the story, because there is no polished way to explain how one engagement announcement blew apart every illusion I had about my family. I always thought of us as stable. Not perfect, not movie kind of perfect, but stable. I have been married to the same man for what feels like several lifetimes already, and we raised two daughters who, from the outside, looked like the usual opposites that somehow belonged to the same family. My older daughter has always been quiet and a little bookish, the type who preferred to sit in the corner at family gatherings texting one close friend instead of dancing in the middle of the room. My younger daughter came into the world loud and never really stopped. She is the kid who always volunteered to lead group projects and somehow walked into every room like it had been waiting for her. Growing up, they had the usual sister dynamic with a little extra spice. The older one got better grades without trying, which made the younger one furious, and the younger one got invited to every birthday party in a 3-block radius, which made the older one quietly jealous even when she pretended not to care. It was all small stuff at first, the kind of petty rivalry you shrug off. When my younger daughter did not make the cut for a sports team one year, she spent almost a week stomping around the house, slamming doors and complaining that the coach was blind, while my older daughter tried to comfort her and then rolled her eyes behind her back. When my older daughter was in high school and had a tiny crush on some boy in her math class who barely knew she existed, my younger one would stroll through the hall like she owned the place, chatting with boys effortlessly. I could see the envy in my older daughter's eyes every now and then, but I told myself that was just part of being sisters. Sometimes I think back to those tiny scenes and see the pattern written all over them. One daughter took up space without even trying. The other quietly made herself smaller. When the younger one pouted, we scrambled to fix it. When the older one said she was fine, we believed her and moved on. We called it keeping the peace. But really, we were teaching one child that the room would always rearrange itself around her, and the other that her job was to live on whatever attention was left. When they left for college, the noisy part of the rivalry kind of faded into the background, mostly because they were suddenly in different states, with new lives to build and new people to impress. My older daughter went first, choosing a university a few hours away, somewhere quiet where she could walk under trees and pretend she was in an old movie. My younger daughter followed 2 years later to a different school in a different direction, and made it clear she was ready to reinvent herself all over again. Our house got quieter in that heavy kind of way. We did the usual things parents do to fill the silence. My husband suddenly cared way more about the lawn than he ever had before, and I found myself reorganizing closets that nobody had touched in years, as if putting old boxes in neater stacks would somehow make the aches smaller. We would sit at the kitchen table with 2 plates instead of 4 and scroll through our phones, pretending to look at news or recipes when really we were waiting for our daughters' names to light up the screen. People always talk about how exciting it is when kids leave for college, how proud you feel, and that part is true, but they do not talk as much about the echo that moves into the hallway after they go. The laundry load shrank. The grocery cart stopped overflowing. We adjusted and told ourselves this is what good parenting looks like. Your kids growing wings and leaving. Holidays became the anchor points. They would both come home for long weekends, share a room again, laugh and fight over the bathroom like they used to. On the phone between visits, the older one mostly talked about classes and how exhausting everything was, while the younger one sent us photos from parties, always in the middle of a crowd. There were little moments, even back then, that I wish I had paid more attention to. Once, during a visit home, we were sitting on the couch and my younger daughter started showing me silly photos and videos on her phone from some event on campus. She laughed at every clip, pointing herself out in the background like she was playing a game of Where is that person? My older daughter, who was scrolling on her own phone, looked over and froze for a second when she saw her sister in a picture surrounded by friends, some of them with arms around her. It was such a brief expression, just a tiny tightening around her mouth and a flicker in her eyes, but it stayed with me. I asked if she was okay, and she shrugged it off with something like, "It is nothing, I am just tired." I let it go, like I always did. The first big shift came in her second year of college. One evening she called me with that tone that every mother recognizes, the one that says something important happened even if the words are casual. She told me she had met someone. He was a student too, a little younger than her, studying something vaguely technical that I still do not quite understand. She said he made her laugh, that he did not mind when she rambled about her classes, that he remembered small details like which side of the bed she slept on and how she liked her coffee. It sounded like young love, and I will admit I got swept up in it. There is something both sweet and painful about hearing your child talk about their first serious relationship. Part of you wants to warn them about everything that could go wrong, and the other part of you wants to believe this might be the one that works. Several months later, she asked if she could bring him home for a long weekend so we could meet him. My husband and I cleaned the house like we were expecting royalty, even though we pretended we were not doing anything special. When they walked through the door, I could see right away that she adored him. She had that soft, careful smile people get when they are protecting something fragile. He was polite, maybe a little too polished, shaking hands, complimenting the house, talking to my husband about sports like they had known each other for years. Over dinner, he asked a lot of questions, and at first I thought it meant he was genuinely interested in our family, which felt flattering. He wanted to know what I did at work, how long we had been married, whether we always lived in the same town. Then he asked about my younger daughter. He did not say anything inappropriate. It was all framed as curiosity. What is your younger daughter like? Which school does she go to? What is she studying? Is she dating anyone? My older daughter laughed and said something like, "She is the wild one. You will see when you meet her." But there was a tightness in her voice that I did not pay enough attention to. I told him the usual things, that my younger daughter was outgoing, that she was ambitious and always juggling too many things at once. He nodded and smiled, and I pushed away the weird little feeling in my stomach, telling myself that of course a boyfriend would be curious about the rest of the family. Looking back, there were already little hints in the way he smiled when my younger daughter's name came up, this tiny spark of extra interest that I filed under him wanting to make a good impression. He would ask questions that sounded innocent on the surface but felt just a little too focused. Like, does she live on campus or off? Does she come home a lot? What kind of guys does she usually date? At the time, I told myself I was being paranoid, and that it was actually sweet that he wanted to know the people who mattered to his girlfriend. It is funny how your brain will bend over backward to keep a story romantic instead of letting it turn into something ugly. There is nothing strange about that, right? After that first visit, he came back a few more times over the next year. Each time he brought something small, like a box of pastries from a bakery near campus or a candle he said reminded him of our house. He always made a point to help with dishes, to thank us for having him, to ask my husband follow-up questions about his job. On the surface, he was the ideal guest, the kind of young man parents brag about when they talk to their friends. I remember my husband telling me one night after they left that he liked the guy. He said he seemed stable, grounded, exactly what our older daughter needed because she could get stuck in her own head sometimes. I wanted to believe that and went to bed feeling oddly reassured. There were small details that did not sit right with me, but I filed them away under the folder in my mind labeled "Everyone Has Quirks." He was constantly on his phone, even during dinner, always apologizing and saying it was for some project, some urgent group assignment, some deadline. He would glance at the screen, type a quick reply, and then set it down again with a sigh about how demanding everything was. My older daughter acted like this was normal, and I did not want to be the nagging older woman whining about young people and their phones, so I forced myself not to comment. At some point, my younger daughter added him on a social media app. Looking back now, my older daughter says the signs were there long before she caught him cheating. My younger daughter had been liking his posts, dropping little comments, and popping up under almost everything he shared. At the time, it just looked like normal family friendliness online, and none of us read it as anything more until it was too late. She mentioned it to me almost casually during a phone call, like, "By the way, I think your older one's boyfriend is kind of cute." I added him when he commented on a photo. She laughed it off and said something about how her sister had finally gotten lucky in love this time. I remember laughing too, but when I hung up, the way she said it replayed in my mind. Not quite joking, not quite serious. I told myself I was overthinking. Mothers are world-class overthinkers. It could have been nothing. There were signs that my older daughter's world was cracking long before she called me in tears. But I only really saw them in hindsight. Our video calls got shorter and less frequent. There were dark circles under her eyes that she tried to hide with makeup. Her apartment background looked messier every time we talked. When I asked about her boyfriend, she would smile in this practiced way and say he was busy, that they were both overwhelmed with classes, that it was hard to align schedules. She brushed off my questions, and I let her. I did not want to be the overbearing mother who pushes too hard and makes her daughter shut down completely. Eventually, my gut got louder than my manners. One week, after too many brief calls and one too many times of her saying she was fine while looking like she was anything but, I decided to visit her. I booked a ticket, told my husband I needed to see her with my own eyes, and showed up at her apartment with a bag of groceries and a forced, cheerful smile. The place that greeted me was not the cozy student mess I expected. It was something heavier. There were dishes in the sink that looked like they had been there for days. There was takeout containers on the counter, half-eaten. The trash smelled off. The fridge had containers with food so old I did not want to open them. And my daughter, my quiet, sensitive daughter, looked like someone had taken an eraser to her and dragged it back and forth until everything was smudged. She tried to keep things light like she always does, cracking little jokes about being too busy to clean, blaming midterms. But when she turned around to grab something from the cabinet, I saw how the back of her shirt hung looser than it should. She had lost weight she did not have to lose. There were little bald patches in her eyebrows where she had clearly been pulling at them. I asked about her boyfriend, expecting at least a mention, but she dodged every mention of his name. She said he was buried in some project, that they were trying not to distract each other. It sounded like lines she had practiced in her head. I kept trying, gently, then not so gently, to get past the surface. She smiled. She deflected. She insisted she was just tired. At one point during that visit, I walked into the bathroom and had to sit on the edge of the tub for a minute just to breathe. Her toothbrush was dry, her laundry basket was overflowing, and there was a half-empty bottle of some generic sleeping pills on the counter that she had not mentioned to me once. I stared at my own reflection and had that awful thought every parent has at least once, the one that sounds like, how did I miss it getting this bad? I splashed water on my face, told myself not to make it about me, and walked back out with a smile that felt like it was glued on crooked. The weirdest part of that visit was that he never showed up. Not once. I stayed for several days, long enough that a boyfriend who cared should have at least come over to say hello. She always had an excuse. He is out of town. He is in the library. He caught a cold and does not want to get you sick. On the last day, I heard her phone buzz on the table. She glanced at it, and her face changed in this quick, scared way, like she had been caught doing something wrong. She flipped it face down and said she needed to run an errand alone. Something in me broke a little, but I swallowed it and hugged her tight before I left, telling her to call me if she needed anything. Anything at all. A couple of months after that visit, my phone rang late at night. You know that instant alarm your body gets when you see your child's name on the screen outside normal hours. My heart was already racing before I picked up. She was crying so hard I could barely make out words at first. All I could hear was, "I cannot do this. I cannot do this," over and over again. Eventually, she managed to say that it was over. The relationship, the future she had imagined, everything. She said he had left, that he had broken up with her, and that it felt like someone had reached inside her chest and pulled out all the air. I asked why. Of course I did. I asked if he had met someone else, if they had a big argument, if something specific had happened. She would not answer. She kept saying it did not matter, that she just needed me to come. So I went. My husband and I took turns visiting her over the next few months, because we did not want her to feel abandoned, and we also could not just abandon our lives. Each time I saw little bits of improvement, then backslides. There was one visit where I found a little stack of sticky notes on her nightstand with tiny goals written in her handwriting. Things like take a shower before noon and answer one message from a friend and eat something that is not delivery. It broke my heart and impressed me at the same time, because it meant she knew she was not okay, but she was at least trying to give herself a roadmap out of the fog. Another time I opened her fridge and it was full of carefully prepped containers. And for a second I felt hopeful, only to realize later she had not touched half of them because even taking off a lid felt like work on some days. She would get up and shower and make herself a decent meal one week, then the next week she would be back on the couch with the lights off, staring at the wall. When we suggested therapy, she resisted at first, insisting she was fine and that time would fix it. But time was not fixing it. Not fast enough. Eventually, she agreed to talk to someone professional, more out of exhaustion than conviction, I think. During all of that, she refused to give details. My husband tried a different angle and attempted to reach out to the ex directly, thinking maybe he could get some explanation that would help us help her. He blocked us anywhere he could think of. Calls went straight to voicemail, messages never delivered, and even the accounts we could still see felt like they were behind a locked door. It was like the young man who had sat at our table cracking jokes about how much he loved our older daughter had vanished into thin air. The silence made everything worse, because when you do not have facts, your mind fills in blanks with the worst possible options. Meanwhile, life with my younger daughter was busy in a completely different way. She finished her degree, jumped from one short-term job to another, always chasing something more exciting. Whenever we tried to organize a holiday, it turned into a scheduling puzzle. At first, the sisters still showed up to the same events, even if it was a little awkward. Over time, I started noticing that my older daughter had excuses whenever she knew her sister would be present. She would offer to fly us to visit her instead, telling us she was slammed at work and could not travel, or that she was not feeling well. The first time she skipped a major holiday, she blamed a work commitment so last-minute and strict that she almost cried from frustration while explaining. I believed her, because I wanted to. One winter, we managed to get both of them under our roof on the same day for a holiday dinner. My older daughter arrived early, helped me in the kitchen, talked to my husband about her new job, made me laugh with some story about her colleagues. For a little while, it felt almost normal. Then my younger daughter breezed in, late, glowing, perfectly done hair, carrying a dessert she had bought on the way. The air in the room changed. I wish I was exaggerating. It went from comfortable to tight in about 10 seconds. My older daughter's shoulders stiffened. She stopped moving around and sat at the corner of the dining table, staring at her plate. My younger one, oblivious or pretending to be, immediately launched into a list of her recent successes. The big presentation she had knocked out of the park, the new people she was meeting, the trips she wanted to take. Before we even sat down to eat, my older daughter excused herself, claiming a sudden migraine. She hugged me quickly, avoiding her sister's eyes completely, and left. She texted later saying she was sorry. My younger daughter rolled her eyes and said something like, "Some people just do not know how to be happy for others." I did not like that comment, but I was tired and did not want to start a fight during what was left of our holiday dinner. So I told her to sit down and eat before everything got cold. That night, when my husband and I went to bed, we talked about it in hushed voices, both of us dancing around the possibility that something serious had gone wrong between them. I remember staring at the ceiling and replaying the way my older daughter had grabbed her bag, the way her hands had shaken just a little when she said she had a migraine. Part of me wanted to march into my younger daughter's room right then and demand answers, ask her what exactly she had said or done that made her sister look like she had been slapped just by existing in the same space. Instead, I did what I always seem to do when it comes to them. I convinced myself it was not the right moment, that bringing it up would only make things worse, that adults are allowed to have weird moods. I chose peace over clarity, and that choice came back later like a bill I could not afford to pay. We told ourselves that maybe they had just grown apart, that adults do that sometimes, even siblings. We did not push further. Looking back, that was mistake number 100 on a long list. Time went on. My older daughter kept going to therapy. Slowly, she became someone who could function again, not just drag herself through the days. She got a promotion at work, started mentioning a new person she was spending time with, another colleague who made her feel seen without asking her to pretend she was fine when she was not. She did not call him her boyfriend for a long time, which I respected. After what she had gone through, it made sense that she was cautious. From the little details she shared, I could tell he was kind in simple ways that actually matter. He picked her up when her car broke down. He remembered how she liked her tea. He did not demand that she post him everywhere on social media to prove they were real. Then one afternoon, my younger daughter called with a kind of breathless excitement I was not used to hearing from her. Usually she was the one who acted like she had all the options in the world, and none of them were serious enough to get worked up over. This time her voice had a different edge. She said, "I need you and Dad home for dinner next weekend. I am bringing someone, and it is important." I asked the obvious questions, and she just laughed and said, "You will see, you are going to love him." She told me she was finally ready for something serious, ready to introduce someone officially, not just as a casual hangout. My husband and I looked at each other and did the whole excited parents routine, texting each other while she was still on the phone about what we would cook, whether we should buy flowers, all of that. Later, I learned it was not some sudden whirlwind. By the time we sat down for that dinner, they had already been together for almost a year. The planning part had been happening quietly for months, talking about venues, pricing, and dates in secret long before we saw the ring. She wanted that dinner to be the night everyone caught up to the reality she had already decided on, Not the night she asked for our blessing. The day of the dinner, I set the table nicer than usual. I will admit that. I pulled out the good plates, the set we usually only use when we feel obligated to pretend we know how to host like people on those cooking shows. I made her favorite dish. I was nervous in that weird way that feels almost like waiting for an exam result. My husband tried to act cool but asked me every 5 minutes if I needed help. When the doorbell finally rang, my heart jumped into my throat in a way that felt ridiculous, considering I was just meeting a man my adult daughter was dating. I walked to the door, smoothed my shirt like that would fix anything about my life, and opened it. My younger daughter was standing there, beaming, one hand held up so I could see the ring sparkling on her finger. Next to her was a face I knew. It took my brain a second to put the pieces together, because sometimes shock makes you stupid for a moment. Then it hit me like a migraine. It was him. The same young man who had sat at our table years earlier, holding my older daughter's hand under the napkin, laughing at our jokes, telling us he loved our family. He was standing on my porch next to my younger daughter, his arm around her shoulders with that same polite smile. For a second, everything went quiet in my head. She was talking, words spilling out fast. Something about he proposed. Something about how they had been keeping it quiet until they were sure, how she knew we would be thrilled. I could feel my face going pale, which she probably thought was emotion. But in reality, it was the feeling of the ground shifting under my feet. My husband came up behind me, said hello, and froze too, his hand tightening on the doorframe. I saw recognition spread over his face like someone had just turned a light on. Our younger daughter either did not see it or pretended not to. They came inside, and I went into autopilot. I hugged her. I nodded at him. I said congratulations because that is what you say when your daughter shows you a ring. Inside, there was a storm. We all sat down at the table, and my husband and I could barely look at each other. My younger daughter kept talking, filling every silence, telling us how they had reconnected, how sometimes life takes you in unexpected directions, how she had never felt this sure about anything. At some point, she said something like, "And of course my sister knows. She is happy for us. We talked. It is all good." That was the moment I snapped back into my body. I put my fork down. I remember the sound it made on the plate because in that moment every little noise felt too loud. I asked her directly, "Does your sister really know all of this?" "Every part of it." She rolled her eyes in that dramatic way she has and said, "Yes, of course. She has moved on, Mom. She has her own life. She told me she is fine with it. Why are you making faces?" She laughed a little when she said it, like I was the one being unreasonable. The man sitting next to her glanced down at his plate and did not say a word. My husband cleared his throat and asked when exactly they had started seeing each other. That is when the answers got slippery. She gave us vague timelines. After college. After things ended between him and the older sister. After everyone had moved on. She insisted it had just happened, that they had met again through some mutual friends, that sometimes the heart wants what it wants. I could feel my anger rising, slow and hot. I tried to imagine my older daughter lighting a candle for her sister's happiness after being broken by this same man, and the image would not fit. At some point, my younger daughter started listing all the ways we had supposedly favored her sister over her growing up. She said, "You always took her side. You always celebrated her achievements more. You liked all her quiet, polite act and treated me like the wild child." She said when our older daughter first brought him home, we had practically rolled out a red carpet. I wanted to scream that we had treated him like a guest because that is what you do. Not because of some secret conspiracy, but instead I just stared at the two of them, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. Eventually I got up, because sitting still felt impossible. I walked upstairs, every step heavier than it should have been, and opened the drawer where we kept the spare keys for family. Both girls had copies at one point, back when home still meant the same thing for everyone. I found my younger daughter's spare key, the one she barely used anymore but still expected to work like a free pass whenever it was convenient. I walked back downstairs and placed it in her palm. She looked confused for a second, then offended. I told her to go upstairs, take anything that was still hers from her old room, and either give the key back on her way out or keep it as a souvenir of the boundary she was crossing. I know that sounds dramatic, and trust me, it felt dramatic. But in that moment, I felt like I had to draw a line somewhere. I told her plainly that I could not pretend this was normal. I said, "You made a choice, and that choice hurt your sister in a way you clearly have not even tried to understand." I told her that if she wanted to move forward with this engagement, I could not stop her. But she should stop calling this house her safe place if she was going to use it to parade around the man who had already broken one of us. She exploded, obviously. She accused me of punishing her for finally finding real love. She said I was making it about something that happened years ago and refusing to see how happy they were now. The man next to her stayed mostly quiet, letting her do the emotional heavy lifting, which honestly made me dislike him even more. He only spoke up once to say in this soft voice that he understood if we needed time, that he hoped eventually we could all move past the past. He added that he never meant to hurt anyone, that feelings were complicated, and that he hoped we could all start fresh, like my older daughter had been nothing more than a rough draft of the life he actually wanted. I wanted to ask him if his definition of the past included the years my older daughter spent crying in the dark, wondering why she was not enough. They left angry, slamming the door, the ring on her finger flashing under the porch light as she gestured wildly. As soon as the house was quiet again, I picked up my phone. My hands were shaking so much I could barely tap the screen properly. I called my older daughter. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear traffic in the background. I asked her a simple question, even though we both knew it was not simple at all. I asked her if she knew that her sister was engaged to the man she had spent almost 4 years with. There was a long pause, then she sighed in this way that sounded like she had been holding her breath for a decade. She said she knew they were together. She did not sound happy. She did not sound fine. She sounded like someone who had been waiting for this moment, dreading it. I asked if she had really given them her blessing the way her sister claimed. She laughed, and it was the saddest laugh I have ever heard in my life. It was one of those laughs people do when they are too tired to cry. My husband took the phone then, because I was shaking too much. He used the voice he saves for when he is deadly serious, the one that makes even grown men sit up straight. He told her that we were done guessing and dancing around things. He asked her to please, finally, tell us the full story. No more protecting anyone. No more vague hints. Just the truth. There was another long silence, and then she started to talk. She told us that near the end of her relationship with him, she had started noticing little things. Messages that disappeared. Sudden changes in his schedule. Inside jokes with people he swore were just friends. One day she saw a notification pop up on his phone that he had not hidden fast enough. It was a message with a heart from someone who was absolutely not her. When she confronted him, he did not deny it. He admitted he had cheated, that there had been someone else, but he refused to say who. He told her that if she trusted him, she would drop it. He made her feel crazy for wanting to know. She tried to work through it at first. She told us about nights where she sat on the bathroom floor shaking, wondering if she was making things bigger than they were. She tried to forgive him, tried to patch the holes in something that was clearly already sinking, until one day she realized she was spending more time worrying about what he was doing on his phone than about her own life. So she ended it. She said it was the hardest thing she had ever done because she still loved him, but she could not keep being the only one fighting. Not even 2 months later, she opened a social media app and there they were. What made it worse was realizing, as she scrolled back through old notifications, that my younger daughter had been orbiting him for a while, liking his posts, dropping little comments, sending harmless-looking messages, before the breakup was even official. A photo of him and her sister, smiling. Her sister's caption was something nauseating about finally choosing herself. There were hearts in the comments, people cheering them on. She described the moment like being punched in the chest. All the missing puzzle pieces slammed into place. The late-night messages, the weird questions he had asked about her sister, the way her sister had started making these little comments about how cute he was, how lucky her older sibling was. She confronted her sister in person once, in a parking lot outside a coffee shop. They were standing next to their cars with cold, wind-whipping hair into their faces, and she asked the only question that mattered. How could you? Her sister shrugged. According to my older daughter, she did not cry, did not apologize, did not even look particularly guilty. She said something like, "These things just happen, you two were already falling apart anyway." When my older one tried to explain that no, they had not been falling apart until the betrayal, her sister rolled her eyes and said she was being dramatic. She told her that people do ugly things when they are in love. She acted like my older daughter was an obstacle that needed to be moved out of the way, not a human being who had been hurt. After that day, they stopped talking. My older daughter said she had decided not to tell us everything because she was ashamed. She admitted she also did not want to be the reason we turned on her sister or spent the next decade replaying every holiday and wondering where we had gone wrong. So she swallowed it all and tried to let us keep our illusion of peace. She felt like getting cheated on by her boyfriend and replaced by her own sister meant there was something wrong with her. She did not want to see the disappointment in our faces. She figured it would be less painful if we all pretended it was a normal breakup. Meanwhile, My younger daughter had apparently woven a completely different story for everyone else. One where she and this man had found each other after he and her sister had gone their separate ways for totally unrelated reasons. I listened to all of this with my phone pressed to my ear, feeling anger and guilt wash over me in waves. How had I not seen it? How had I stood there at my counter chatting pleasantly while my older daughter was being slowly dismantled right under my nose? My husband sat next to me, his face pale, staring at the wall like he was seeing all the past few years on fast forward. We had been so focused on not prying, on giving our adult children space, that we had missed that one of them was quietly drowning. That night, after we hung up, we made a decision that felt both obvious and impossible. We decided we would not go to the wedding. We did not make the decision lightly. We lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, going over every possible angle. We knew that not going would cause a rift. We knew people would talk. But the idea of sitting there smiling politely while our younger daughter walked down an aisle toward a man who had lied and cheated his way into our family twice in 2 different roles made both of us feel physically sick. A few days later, the phone calls started. Word travels fast in a family like ours. Some relatives were horrified and said they would not go to the wedding. Others shrugged and called it complicated, told us to be the bigger people. After a week of that, I was exhausted and completely done explaining anything to anyone. It turned out my younger daughter had gone to my mother and asked about using money my mother had set aside over the years for the girls' futures, the kind of savings she always talked about like it was a safety net. That account had always been framed as something for school, for emergencies, for giving the girls a softer landing into adulthood. My mother was proud of that, of being the grandparent who could help. Now she was being asked to redirect that fund into paying for a ceremony, a dress, a party. At first she was excited, thinking it was a sweet milestone. Then she heard through someone else that we were not attending, and in her mind, that made us the villains. At that point, my mother did not know the full story. She just knew that one granddaughter was in love and planning a wedding, and her middle-aged daughter and son-in-law were supposedly being petty and unforgiving. She told me that the young man was charming, that he had visited her with my younger daughter, that he had sat in her living room and held her hand and thanked her for helping set them up for the future. She told me I was being childish, that I needed to put aside whatever drama I had cooked up and be happy for them. I let her finish the lecture. Then I took a deep breath and did something I had been avoiding for too long. I told her the truth, not just the polished version, but the whole messy timeline. I told her about the years he had spent with my older daughter. I reminded her of the holidays where he had sat at our table with his arm around her chair. I told her about the messages on his phone, the confession of cheating, the refusal to say who with. I told her about the photo of him and my younger daughter that had shown up when my older one was still trying to breathe again. I spelled out how long those timelines overlapped. I told her about the parking lot confrontation, the gaslighting, the way my younger daughter had dismissed her sister's pain like it was a minor inconvenience. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then my mother said that it sounded unbelievable. She accused me of exaggerating, of trying to make the situation worse than it was to justify my stance. She wanted proof. So my husband dug through old photos, the ones we do not normally scroll through anymore. He pulled up images of previous holidays where the ex had his arm around our older daughter, dates stamped clearly, outfits and decorations matching the years we remembered. We sent those to my mother, along with a newer photo from my younger daughter's social media, where she was wearing the ring and calling him the love of her life. When the timestamps lined up in a way that could not be explained away by fuzzy memory, my mother went quiet. She said she needed time to think and hung up. I did not know which way it would go. She has always had a soft spot for my younger daughter, who learned early how to charm her, how to make herself seem like the little star of every family gathering. I was half prepared for my mother to decide that love is love and money is money, and that we were overreacting. The next morning, she called back. Her voice sounded older. She told me that she had confronted them. She said she had asked point blank when they had started talking romantically, not just as family. She asked if there had been any overlap, if there had been any emotional cheating at minimum. She told me they had squirmed, that they had tried to dance around the questions, that my younger daughter had turned on the waterworks and accused her of being unfair. Eventually, my mother saw enough in their reactions to know that we had not been lying. She told them she would not be using the education fund to pay for a wedding built on this mess. My younger daughter did not take that well. Apparently, she had been counting on that money. She argued that it was hers, that it had been promised, that it should not come with moral conditions now that she wanted to use it. My mother, who can be terrifying when she decides she is done putting up with nonsense, held firm. She told her that the fund had always been meant to support opportunities and future security, not reward betrayal. She said that if anyone was getting help from her savings now, it would be the granddaughter who had been cheated on, not the one who had stepped into her place. Then my mother did something that set off the next wave of chaos. She wrote a long message and sent it to a group chat that includes most of the extended family. She explained calmly that she had decided not to fund the wedding and laid out a simplified but accurate version of why. She did not call anyone names. She did not use dramatic language. She just lined up the facts: old relationship, cheating, new relationship with the sister, overlapping timelines, emotional fallout, her decision. A week later, she quietly used part of her own savings to help my older daughter cover therapy bills and the deposit on a new place closer to her job. The first time I had seen that money used to repair damage instead of pretending it did not exist. She was not stealing from one granddaughter to reward the other. She was finally deciding that her money was not going to fund a celebration built on betrayal. You can imagine what happened after that. The group chat exploded. My phone would not stop buzzing that day. Little gray bubbles popped up faster than I could read them, cousins sending shocked emojis, an aunt typing out long messages and deleting them before sending something shorter and more passive-aggressive, an uncle chiming in hours later with a single sentence that somehow managed to sound judgmental without picking a clear side. I kept muting and unmuting the conversation, torn between wanting to see every reaction and wanting to throw the phone into the sink and bury it under dirty dishes. It felt like hosting a family reunion in my pocket where everyone was yelling over each other and nobody was actually listening. Some relatives responded with outrage on behalf of my older daughter. They said things like, "I had no idea. This is disgusting, poor girl." Others took the more neutral route, the classic, "Well, love is complicated. Maybe we should not judge," as if cheating with your sibling's partner is just one of those quirky things life throws at you. A few tried to stay out of it altogether, sending vague comments about hoping everyone would find peace. My sister called me, furious, saying that it was inappropriate to air family business like that. She said that even if what happened was wrong, it did not mean we should blow up a whole wedding. A cousin tried to mediate, saying that people do stupid things when they are young and that holding grudges forever was not healthy. Meanwhile, my younger daughter went into full victim mode. She posted vague things on social media about cutting off toxic people, about choosing herself, about how some relatives preferred drama to love. She messaged some family members directly saying that her parents were trying to ruin her happiness, that her sister had manipulated everyone into turning against her. She framed herself as someone finally brave enough to follow her heart despite judgment. As all of this swirled around us, the wedding planning started to wobble. At first, my younger daughter and her fiancé tried to act like they were above it all. They posted cute photos of cake tastings, centerpieces, all the usual stuff. But without my mother's fund, the numbers started looking different. Deposits became heavier, vendors wanted money they did not have, and then something else happened. The fiancé's own family started asking questions. Apparently, until that point, he had given them a neatly edited version of events, one where he had dated some girl a long time ago in college, and it had ended naturally, and only later had he met her amazing younger sister. But extended family talk is like smoke. It finds its way into every house. Bits of the real story reached them. A relative of ours who knew someone on their side mentioned the overlapping relationships. Screenshots of my mother's message floated across phones. Suddenly, his mother was calling my younger daughter asking for explanations. His father was wondering aloud what else had been hidden. Some of his friends, who had known my older daughter back then and had liked her, made their discomfort clear. We heard about this secondhand, but the effects landed in our living room anyway. My younger daughter showed up one afternoon without warning. She was pale and looked exhausted. She started by screaming. She said that we had poisoned everyone against her, that if we had just kept quiet and let her be happy, none of this would have happened. She blamed us for her future mother-in-law's coldness, for friends who were suddenly too busy to answer her calls, for vendors who were asking for full payment up front because the family backing no longer looked secure. My husband listened quietly for a while and then told her firmly that her situation was of her own making. He told her he loved her, which is true, but that loving someone does not mean pretending their choices have no consequences. He said that we had allowed her to tell the story her way for long enough, and that the result had been our older daughter suffering in silence. He said we had chosen truth over comfort this time, and that he did not regret it. She did not want to hear that. She accused us of choosing one daughter over the other. I told her that we were finally choosing ourselves too, choosing not to be complicit. The pressure kept building. Costs, judgment, cold shoulders from people who had previously been warm. About 3 weeks after my mother sent her message, his own parents finally sat him down with the screenshots and dates laid out on their kitchen table and asked him to walk them through the timeline out loud. 5 days before the wedding date, after a weekend of tense conversations, pulled checks, and one brutal late-night phone call where his mother said she could not support a ceremony built on a lie, the fiancé called it off. We found out the same way everyone else did, through a ripple of calls and messages. Some relatives said he had decided the drama was not worth it. Others said his parents had threatened to cut him off financially if he went through with it. There were rumors that he had started to feel guilty deep down, but if I am honest, I doubt that guilt was the main driver. Pride and discomfort can look a lot like guilt from the outside. We later heard that he had been lying to his own family about the timing too, painting a picture where my older daughter had been a short, insignificant relationship from his youth, nothing worth mentioning in detail. When my husband heard that part, he did not raise his voice or throw anything, which somehow made it worse. He just sat very still in his chair, jaw clenched, and stared at a spot on the wall like he was trying to burn a hole through it. Later that night, he admitted that out of everything, that detail made him the angriest. Not just the cheating, but the way this man had tried to rewrite his history with our daughter, like she had been some practice run instead of a person who had once cried on our couch over his favorite snack. My husband is not dramatic, so when he said he would never let that man back in our house even if the world ended, I believed him. When the truth came out, his parents were furious, not just about the moral mess, but about the public embarrassment. They pulled their financial support. They told him he had to move out of the apartment they were paying for. Friends who had been cheering him on began to back away quietly. It turns out that even people who like to pretend they are open-minded about everything still have lines they do not want crossed when it is their own family involved. After the wedding was canceled, my younger daughter came over one last time. She stood in the doorway like a stranger. She said that we had ruined her life. She said that none of this would have happened if we had just smiled and sat through the ceremony. She did not mention her sister's pain once. She did not acknowledge the cheating. She framed everything as a campaign against her happiness. I asked her, as gently as I could manage, if she felt any regret at all about what she had done to her sister. If there was any part of her that understood why we could not just pretend this was a normal love story. She looked at me like I was speaking another language. She said something like, "Everyone makes mistakes, and you are acting like I committed some unforgivable crime." She said that people in love do messy things and that we were stuck in the past. I realized then that we were not talking about the same reality at all. For her, the betrayal was a minor footnote compared to the tragedy of a canceled wedding. For me, it was the other way around. My husband told her that this was the last time he was going to have this conversation. He said, "You are our daughter and we love you, but we will not keep letting you come into this house, call us toxic, and then disappear until you need something." He said that if she wanted to rebuild any kind of relationship with us, it would have to start with honest remorse and respect for her sister. She did not accept that. She stormed out, blocked both of us on every app she uses, and posted some new cryptic message about breaking free from controlling relatives. The relationship between her and the ex did not survive much longer after that. The combination of family pressure, financial stress, and social fallout was too much. They broke up quietly, or at least as quietly as two people who live half their lives in public can. There was no dramatic announcement, just fewer and fewer appearances together until he vanished from her photos entirely. Every once in a while, someone mentions seeing his profile online with a new partner, someone completely unrelated to our family, and I just feel tired. Life did not magically become easy after all this. There was no neat fade out with soft music. We still have an older daughter who carries scars from being betrayed twice by people she trusted. We still have a younger daughter who is angry at us, who tells anyone who will listen that we destroyed her big love story. We still have a complicated family group chat where some parties have muted others, and every holiday planning session feels like carefully diffusing a bomb. We have developed this strange, unspoken choreography around it. My husband and I sit with a calendar between us like it is some kind of puzzle, talking through which branch of the family can handle being in the same room, who needs advance warning, and which topics are completely off limits unless we want to watch the whole night catch fire. Sometimes we end up doing smaller gatherings with just a few people and too much food, and other times we split up for a day so nobody has to pick a side in front of us. It is not the holiday fantasy I pictured when the girls were little and making paper turkeys at the dining table, but it is the version we can live with right now without everyone going home bleeding. But there are good things too. Our older daughter kept going to therapy. She kept showing up for her own life. Over time, she let herself trust her new partner more. They built something slowly, without grand gestures, more like layering bricks than fireworks. One afternoon, she called and said she had accepted a proposal. There was no big social media reveal. She just told us in her soft, steady voice that she wanted to marry a man who had stood by her through panic attacks and nightmares and awkward family conversations. When I met him properly, I understood why. He is not flashy. He is not the kind of man who would charm a whole room in 10 minutes. But he looks at her like she is a person, not a prize. When she gets overwhelmed, he does not make it about himself. He just sits with her until her breathing slows. When they set a date for their wedding, they kept it small. No huge venue, no elaborate decorations. They invited the people who had actually been there for her while she was putting herself back together. We went, of course. I cried through the whole ceremony, half from happiness and half from grief for everything that had been lost. There was an empty space in my mind where my younger daughter should have been, rolling her eyes at sentimental speeches, taking shots by the bar. She was not there. She did not come. She sent a short message beforehand saying she hoped her sister would be happy, but that she could not stand in a room full of people who had decided she was the villain. I do not know if she meant that or if it was another performance. But either way, she was absent. After the reception, when we got back to the hotel and my husband fell asleep almost immediately, I sat in the chair by the window and let everything settle. I thought about how, when my daughters were little and fighting over toys, I would always try to make them apologize and hug it out, as if that would erase whatever hurt had just happened. I used to say things like, "One day you will be all each other has, so you need to take care of each other." It sounds nice when they are small. It sounds naive when you are looking at the wreckage of what they actually did to each other. My husband deals with it differently than I do. He keeps most of his feelings folded up inside, like shirts stacked in a drawer, all the edges lined up. Every once in a while, though, it spills out. He will hear a song that used to play in the car when the girls were teenagers and suddenly go quiet. Or he will linger a little too long in the hallway outside their old rooms, pretending he is looking for something in a closet that is mostly empty now. One night, when we could not sleep, he said he sometimes feels like he failed as a father because he did not teach them how to treat each other better. I told him that we taught them what we could, and that they are adults who make their own choices now, but part of me understands what he means. When your kids hurt each other, it is hard not to look in the mirror and wonder what part of that hurt has your signature on it. There are tiny, ordinary moments that feel like victories now. The first time my older daughter called just to talk about something stupid she had seen online, and not to cry or ask for advice, I hung up and cried in the kitchen out of sheer relief. The first time she and her husband visited and she fell asleep on our couch in the middle of the afternoon with a blanket over her feet, breathing deeply instead of tossing and turning, I took a mental picture and filed it under proof that healing is possible, even if it is slow and uneven and nothing like the clean arcs people write about in novels. Those are the things I hold on to when the guilt about my younger daughter wakes me up at 3 a.m. and sits on my chest until the sky starts to lighten. I do not stalk my younger daughter online the way some parents do, but I cannot pretend I never look. Every now and then I type her name into a search bar on a social media app and scroll just enough to see that she is still out there, taking selfies in restaurant bathrooms, posting pictures of coffee and sunsets, writing long paragraphs about growth and healing that make no mention of the people she stepped on along the way. I do not comment. I do not like anything. I just watch for a second, make sure she seems alive and mostly okay, and then close the app before I spiral into imagining entire conversations that may never happen. It is a weird kind of parenting, loving someone from a distance and hoping that someday they will turn around and decide they are ready to see you as a person again, not just a barrier. The funniest part, if there is anything funny here at all, is how normal our life looks from the outside. To the neighbors, we are just that middle-aged couple who take walks after dinner and argue quietly about the yard. To my coworkers, I am just another woman who keeps family photos on her desk and complains about deadlines. Nobody sees the mental flowchart I have built for every holiday invitation, the way I calculate which relative knows what version of the story, or the way my stomach drops when I see certain names flash across the screen. From a distance, we probably look boring. Up close, it feels like living in a house that used to have a missing wall and now has a new one patched over it. It holds for the most part, but if you press your hand in the right spot, you can still feel where everything cracked. If you are wondering whether I regret telling the truth, the answer is no. But it is not a clean, heroic no. Telling the truth cost us our younger daughter, at least for now. It changed the way holidays look and the way I walk past the extra chair at the table. People love to say that honesty is always the best policy, but what they usually mean is that they want honesty as long as it does not make them pick a side or sit in any discomfort. In real life, sometimes you tell the truth, and end up with fewer people at your table and a little more peace. And you have to decide if you can live with that. There is one last thing I think about more often than I admit out loud. When the girls were little and fought over something ridiculous like a plastic bracelet or who got to sit in the front seat, I used to kneel down between them and say that one day it would just be the two of them when we were gone and they were going to need each other. It felt like one of those cheesy parent lines you repeat because it sounds true enough. Now I know you can raise two people in the same house with the same speeches and still watch them grow into adults who can barely stand to be in the same room. I have not entirely killed the hope that one day my younger daughter might be ready to come back and face what really happened, but I am done living like everything is on pause until she does. For now, it is one daughter here, one somewhere out there, and me learning how to love both without lying to myself. I will always love both of my daughters. That never changed. What changed is my willingness to pretend that betrayal is just a complicated kind of love everyone should clap for. My older daughter rebuilt her life brick by brick, and seeing her finally sleep through the night is the closest thing to peace I have had in years. My younger daughter is still out there telling her version to anyone who will listen. On her birthday last year, I wrote a simple message, nothing dramatic, just that I was thinking of her and hoped she was safe. The text never went through. I tried sending a card through my mother instead, and weeks later she handed it back to me unopened because she did not want to lie about whether it had been read. That was enough of an answer. For now, I let my younger daughter tell whatever story she needs to tell about us, and I let the silence sit where it sits. Maybe one day she will be ready to face the real story. Until then, my job is simple. Tell the truth, protect the daughter who is hurt, and keep living, even with one empty chair at the table.